Our political panel joining us now, Democratic strategist Madeline Somerville and Republican strategist Matt Klink. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate your time tonight. So, Matt, I'd like to start with you. This is now the third shooting involving federal agents in recent weeks. The shooting death of Renee Good. We had another non-lethal shooting, and now the events of this morning. The administration up to this point has said rhetoric from public officials is leading to violence. And if you would let us into your jails, we wouldn't have to be roaming the streets doing these operations. At the same time, there are polls that suggest a majority of Americans believe the tactics ICE has used have gone too far. So do you see this recent incident changing the approach from the federal government, and should it?
Kelly, thanks. It's a great question. Look, the challenge here is what Governor Walz and Mayor Frey want is they basically want, or not basically, they are telling the federal government, we're not going to enforce immigration laws in Minneapolis or in Minnesota. This is what modern day Democratic leadership looks like. Look at the chaos that's reigning on those streets. That's not the ICE officers' fault. That's the radicals in those cities that are doing this. Look at the gentleman that was killed. He was following ICE officers when they were going to arrest an illegal immigrant charged with domestic abuse. He allegedly brandished a weapon, which you're allowed to have a weapon, but you're not allowed to brandish it. And if you brandish a weapon at law enforcement, guess what? Unfortunately, bad things happen. So the things that you're talking about the people being killed, it's because they're impeding legal law enforcement investigations. The politics involved in this is where Congress needs to step up. But we've got 30 million people in this country illegally, and the federal government's just enforcing the law. What the Democrats want is not enforce the law. So where's that line? And that's what no Democrat will answer.
Well, I'll wait to opine on these specific instances, because we know an FBI probe is in now to the Renee Good shooting, and this is so fresh as well. But Madeline, to Matt's point, the governor of the state, Tim Walz, he posted this to X. This was earlier today. Minnesota has had it. This is sickening. The president must end this operation, pull the thousands of violent, untrained officers out of Minnesota now. So obviously, any death is a tragedy, but is the governor going too far, fanning the flames by calling these officers violent and untrained? We know violence against these officers is skyrocketing all at the same time.
I don't think that it's ever unfair to say what the truth is, and it's unfortunate if that fans the flames. The truth here, a couple of truths that I want to communicate. First of all, it's very difficult to trust whatever comes out of DHS, especially when they're deliberately and clearly contradicting exactly what we see with our own eyes. For example, in the Renee Good shooting, when the first statement that we heard from Kristi Noem was the ICE officers were pushing a car out of the snow and this woman ambushed them. They concoct a story to make ICE officers look good, which is exactly what's happening here. I just watched the most recent video that came out of this. This was an ICU nurse who worked at the VA, who stepped in front of a woman who was being pepper sprayed because she was holding her phone up. He literally walked in front of her, stood there, and they continued to spray him. She had a phone in her hand. It got knocked out. As they pushed them to the ground, they saw that he had a weapon that was concealed. He had a permit for concealed carry. They took it. You could see it. They took it out. They threw it away, and they still shot him 9 times. So it's not unfair to call someone violent when they are being violent, and it's convenient for the administration to be able to say, oh, don't say things that are going to fan the flames if what they're saying is actually the truth. So I encourage people to watch the video first before you listen to what Kristi Noem says. Write down what you think about it afterwards, and then hear what the White House is telling you, because it could be 2 different stories. Don't listen if they're telling you not to trust your eyes and ears.
Well, and I think, so much of this would be, it would be clearer if these investigations, these probes were conclusive. There was information because, different angles of videos and different things can paint a much different story. But Matt, I do want to ask you about the response thus far by the administration. There is a lot being made about these two clips now of the vice president saying this about ICE agents and immunity at two separate events. Here they are.
The precedent here is very simple. You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy is protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job. I didn't say, and I don't think any other official within the Trump administration said, that officers who engaged in wrongdoing would enjoy immunity. That's absurd. What I did say is that when federal law enforcement officers violate the law, that is typically something that federal officials would look into.
So there is a distinction there with what he's saying. But at the same time, before all of this unfolded, the president said about the shooting death of Renee Good, quote unquote, ICE is going to make some mistakes. So we know the FBI is leading an investigation into her death. The DOJ says it will not pursue a criminal civil rights investigation. Many Americans believe her shooting wasn't justified if you look at the poll numbers. So would an investigation into the shooting of Renee Good, into this incident, clear up some of these tensions? Do you think they're warranted?
Kelly, thank God we don't let poll results determine innocence or guilt. Federal officers will be investigated by the federal government. That's the way it was when Joe Biden was president. That's the way it was when George W. Bush was president and Barack Obama was president. Let's be very clear here, though, what's going on. You have blue state Democratic governors and progressive big city mayors who do not want to enforce illegal immigration under any circumstances. They instruct their law enforcement to not cooperate with the federal government and with federal law enforcement agents under any circumstances. And then when bad things happen, they say, if you would just talk to us. Well, they're not allowed to talk to us. So the law enforcement are there to enforce the law on the books. And what the Democrats want them to do is to enforce some laws, but not enforce others. So where does it stop? And that's what the Democrats won't answer. Look at the chaos in Minnesota right now.
Well,
that is Democratic leadership.
Take it up with Congress. Right, if you have a problem with the mission. Madeline, we've got 10 seconds left. I'll give you the final word.
Thanks, Kelly. I think that it's going to be a very difficult day of reckoning once the American people realize that only 5% of the people who are currently in ICE detention have ever committed a violent crime. That's the truth of the matter. And when people realize that that's the truth and that all of this chaos has been going on and that Trump has been saying that ICE needs to go in to take all of these people and put them in detention when they're not violent criminals, when that truth comes out, there's going to be a difficult reckoning. So to go look at the truth now, go look at the stats now, and change sides so that your heart is in line with what you want it to be.
So the latest numbers from DHS, some of the latest I've seen, 2,500 criminal illegal aliens in Minnesota have been arrested since the start of this operation. We'll, of course, dig into these numbers throughout the show. Madeline Somerville, Matt Klink, a spirited conversation. We appreciate you both. Thank you very much.